Back to Miller. Oh my goodness.
Herbert.
Sidearm sling, and it's a touchdown.
Tyrese Maxey.
Oh, good spin move by Filipowski for the news. Give him 9.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Beef Upfront podcast. This is your host, Ryan Coyle, back with another episode today as part of our lead up to the college football season. An exciting episode today as we're going to be covering the 10 best quarterbacks, in my opinion, going into this college football season. And it's a really hard list to make. There are so many really talented college football quarterbacks this year, and really looking forward to seeing these guys battle it out. There's a lot of head-to-head matchups that some of these guys are going to be taking on, and there's a lot of guys that I was going to put on this list that are a little bit unproven, but I think could potentially explode this year. And by this time next year, we're going to be like, why weren't they on your top 10 list? So a lot of really, really good players, and as I said, had to keep a few off. But without further ado, we'll get into it. Starting from 10 to 1. My 10th quarterback heading into this year is Jayden Daniels out of LSU. Last year in 2022, he played in 14 games in his first season at LSU after transferring from Arizona State. Had 2,913 passing yards, 68.6% completion percentage. He threw 17 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, really took care of the football, and that's one of the main reasons LSU was able to win 10 games last year. And then he also really did it all on the ground too. One of the best mobile quarterbacks in the sport. 885 rushing yards and 11 rushing touchdowns. One of the players that really benefited the most from a change of scenery last year after coming in from Arizona State. Very, very versatile dual threat quarterback. As I touched on, led LSU to 10 wins and an SEC title game appearance in his first year as a starter there, first year under head coach Brian Kelly. Will be the quarterback this year for an LSU team that I think is going to wind up in the top 5 once the first AP poll comes out. No further than 6th, I think. And if he balls out this year and LSU is in the mix for the national title, he could have a legit shot at the Heisman Trophy. All 10 of these guys have a reasonable shot as long as their team is good enough to be in that kind of national title consideration. All these guys with a good season will be right there in the conversation for the Heisman. Currently sitting here in the middle of July with the third best odds to win the Heisman at plus 1,200. I think that's a pretty good value there for Jayden Daniels, a guy who coming off a 2022 year that he really played well. I think this year he could be ready to explode, more comfortable in the system in his second year, some more weapons around him. I would like to see a little bit more of an expanded passing game from him this year. Only 17 passing touchdowns last year, but did make up for with 11 rushing touchdowns on the ground. And LSU does have a really good ground game. They like to keep it balanced. So I'm looking for him to open it up a little bit more in the passing game. And if he does, he could end up near the top of this list and be one of the guys in New York for the Heisman consideration at the end. He's sitting today with the third best odds, tied with Quinn Ewers, or tied for the second best odds with Quinn Ewers for the Heisman this year. So Jayden Daniels comes in at number 10 on our list. We move up to number 9. One of my personal favorite college football players remaining in the game this year, and that's Cam Rising, the quarterback out at Utah. His 2022 stats looked like 13 games, 3,034 yards. He completed 64.7% of his passes, threw for 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, and he ran for 465 yards and another 6 touchdowns. Entering his third year as a starter for one of the top Pac-12 programs, and you're going to see a lot of guys from the Pac-12 on this list, but this is a Pac-12 that has stacked quarterbacks this year. You look at Cam Rising at Utah, Michael Penix at Washington, Caleb Williams at USC, Bo Nix at Oregon, incoming freshman at UCLA, who I'm really high on, and Dante Moore, and another quarterback who transferred from Clemson out to Oregon State, and DJ Uiagalelei, however you want to pronounce his name. But the Pac-12 is going to be a really exciting year, and it's headlined by some really good quarterbacks. But this Cam Rising could be the potential quarterback for the team that wins the Pac-12 and heads to the playoff. I think Utah, this could be their breakthrough year. He isn't as dynamic as a rushing threat as Jayden Daniels is, but he is still a really good dual threat player and one of the more passionate quarterbacks and best leaders in the country. He's not afraid to lay his body out on the line, put his shoulder down to get the extra yard, to cross the goal line. He'll do whatever he needs to make his team win. And that's just one of the reasons I'm really high on him, and just like what he brings to the table each and every game. Really values experience as well. He's thrown over 700 passes at the college level, has 46 passing touchdowns and over 5,500 passing yards throughout his college career. This will be his third full year as a starter. Just a gamer and fun to watch. Much more of a dark horse than a guy like Jayden Daniels to win the Heisman. As of right now, he's only plus 7,000. I think that's like 15th or 16th best odds. But he still has a pretty good case, I think, if Utah has a really nice year and is potentially in that college football playoff conversation. But he's my 9th best quarterback heading into the year. Number 8, this is a guy I just touched on a little bit ago. He comes in as with the second best odds, currently tied for second to win the Heisman, and that's Quinn Ewers at Texas. He sits at plus 1,200 to win the award. In 2022, he only played 10 games, was limited due to a shoulder, like collarbone injury. Threw for 2,177 yards, though, in those games. Only completed 58.1% of his passes, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So not the most glamorous numbers. His his rushing yards were in the negative just because they count sacks as negative rushing yards, but not a mobile guy. He's a pure pocket passer. So you might be looking at the stats below these guys. And you might think, why the hell is he this high? I'm really just buying in on the upside and the flashes that I saw from Ewers last year when he was healthy. The flashes he showed in that Alabama game and some of the throws he made early before he got hurt with that shoulder injury really stuck out to me. And I'm not sure if he ever fully healed again because he didn't really look like that the rest of the year. But he has another offseason in Steve Sarkisian's offense, a healthy shoulder now, and a great group of pass catchers headlined by one of the premier receivers in the sport and Xavier Worthy. It looks like Ewers is ready to explode, and he's got the talent to lead Texas to a Big 12 title this year. And this is also Texas's last year in the Big 12. So be a great way to kind of go out on top. He could play himself into like first round pick territory, or he could play another year at Texas next year and go to the SEC for another really good year seasoning before he goes to the NFL. And let's not forget about Quinn Ewers. He was the highest graded high school football player ever. He got like a perfect score on the recruiting scale. So this is a kid with freak arm talent. I'd buy stock in him now. Needs to up that completion percentage, as we touched on. Only 58.1% of passes completed last year. That certainly needs to get better, but just pure arm talent, it doesn't get much better than Ewers. And you give him a full and healthy season, I think he explodes. As we touched on, the second best Heisman odds right now at plus 1,200. I think those numbers could go up because Caleb Williams is sitting, we'll talk about him later towards the top, but he's sitting at plus 550 to win the Heisman. There's only been one player to win 2 Heisman trophies, and that was Archie Griffin back in 1974, 1975. So we rarely see a guy go back-to-back, and Caleb Williams did that last year. I'd be surprised to see him do it again. Certainly has the talent and is capable of doing it, but just such a rare feat. Like you saw, Lamar Jackson wasn't able to do it. Bryce Young wasn't able to do it. Johnny Manziel wasn't able to do it. It's very hard to achieve that. So I think looking at getting some other guys with some potential value behind Caleb Williams this is another good reason to listen to this episode and kind of tune into why you might want to invest in one of these guys if you're going to place a future Heisman wager on him. Number 7 on our list of top 10 quarterbacks heading into this college football season, we're going to go with Bo Nix out of Oregon. Had a reclamation project last year after transferring in from Auburn, and he really lit it up in 2022. 13 games, threw for 3,593 yards, completed a whopping 71.9% of his passes, one of the more accurate quarterbacks last year. 29 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, but he really lit it up on the ground, and I wasn't surprised. I wasn't expecting to see his numbers. In 2022, Bo Nix ran for 510 rushing yards, but he had 14 rushing touchdowns, one of the better rushing quarterbacks in all of college football last year, back again for a second year at Oregon. After jumping onto the scene as a true freshman starting quarterback at Auburn, he had a rough couple last few years before transferring to Oregon, and then last year, as I said, a reclamation project, made himself one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. Really pushed the ball down the field well last year, averaged 9.4 yards per attempt and 8.8 yards per completion. So when you look at that combined with his rushing yards as well, he's a true dual threat guy and can really make big plays happen for you. And I feel like he isn't discussed as one of the more mobile guys in the sport, but those rushing yards and the rushing touchdowns say he is. And also in completing nearly 72% of his passes, that's pretty insane. That was the 3rd best completion percentage among quarterbacks that threw more than 300 passes last season. So Bo Nix is one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the sport. He's playing himself back into like a high draft pick type range with another good season here. Second year in the system as well. We usually see a guy take another leap, and I wouldn't rule that out with Nix. He's played a lot of big boy football in his 4 years. This is his fifth year as a starting quarterback at the college level, and he has the sixth best odds currently at plus 400. So Bo Nix is another guy certainly worth looking into and tapping into as a potential Heisman. Number 6 on our list, a guy that I think I'm a little bit more higher on than the consensus, and that's J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. I'm a big fan of his. He really impressed me over the second half of last year. But in 2022 in whole, J.J. McCarthy played 14 games, threw for 2,719 yards, completed about 65% of his passes, threw 22 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions, and he ran for 306 yards and 5 touchdowns. And this was with a Michigan offense that's really predicated on the run game and the ground and pound and that great offensive line up front. Going into his third year as a starter in the program, I think Jim Harbaugh might unleash him a little bit and let him loose. I think if the draft was tomorrow on my big board, he would probably be the number 3 quarterback in this class for me. Might not make sense really with me having him at number 6, but going into this season, at least on the college side, there are more established guys ahead of him at the moment. But I still think there's a lot of upside there for this kid to tap into, and he really impressed me, as I said, down the stretch last year with his arm, his mobility, some real zip on his throws, able to layer it at all different parts of the field and can fit into tight windows. Very good athlete and asset in the run game as well. And as I touched on a little bit at the beginning, I think this is the year where second full year as a starter, he started some games during his freshman year, but I think Harbaugh is really going to trust him and unleash him more. And while they have a great backfield and Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, I think if Michigan wants to get over the top, they've gone to 2 straight college football playoffs, but if they want to get over the top, get into that national title game, and most likely, again, are going to have to play Georgia, you're going to have to outscore them, I think, eventually. With that defense, you're going to have to put up some points, and that's going to be hard to come by if you're just such a run-heavy team. So I'm really excited to see the progression this year out of McCarthy, and I think the guys on this list, he could definitely jump them by year's end, and he could have the biggest overall jump in production out of the guys on this list. Really buying into the upside of him this year. Number 5 player on our list, we are going to go out to the the Pacific Northwest with Michael Penix Jr. out of Washington, another guy who transferred into a new program last year out of Indiana. In 2022, he had 13 games. He threw for 4,641 passing yards, the most in the country last year, completing 65.3% of his passes for 31 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Was held to just 92 rushing yards, but he did have 4 rushing touchdowns as well. A guy that's not really afraid to use his legs when he needs to, kind of down around the goal line. This is one on the list that I think could make me look the most foolish by season's end, because Penix Jr. certainly has a chance at the Heisman. As I have him slotted at number 5 here on my list, he's entering his 5th year playing Power 5 football, so he's one of the more experienced players on this list, and he was the leading passer last year in terms of yards in the entire country. But I am still in a bit of wait and see mode with him, because last year he really burst onto the scene, but it was his first year of success. Is it really going to be that sustainable? I think that's up for debate still. And when he was healthy, we saw the type of production he could put up, but he was limited with his time throughout his time at Indiana due to injuries, the COVID shortened season. But he's known for that great touchdown against Penn State where he just got the tip of the ball over. And they were able to beat the Nittany Lions in that really good year by Indiana. And now Indiana's kind of fallen back to reality after that. But Penix Jr., injury-riddled history at Indiana, has a really good first year at Washington. Can we see him stay healthy again and put up similar numbers? Certainly possible, but I'm still in a bit of wait-and-see mode with that. But another guy like Bo Nix, a second year in the same system, I think that always benefits a quarterback and could allow him to take his game to a potential another level. So if he stays healthy, produces similar numbers, he's going to be one of the top quarterback prospects in next year's draft. Currently has the 9th best Heisman odds at plus 1,600. All right, number 4 on our list, a guy that I'm more high on, I think, than others, and I think he's due for a really big year, and I'm not ruling out Notre Dame as the potential 4th playoff team. I'm going with Sam Hartman, new transfer quarterback for Notre Dame. This is the lone transfer for this season on this list, but in 2022, he had 12 games. He missed the first game or two. I want to say he had a blood clot or something, but he seems to be completely healthy now. But last year, 12 games, 3,701 passing yards, 38 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, but they did throw it a ton at Wake Forest where he transferred from. Completed 63.1% of his passes, had only 129 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. So this is another guy that's more of just your pure pocket passer type quarterback. As I touched on the lone transfer in this list, but I think he's ready to kind of let the world know who he is. Playing at Wake Forest the past few years, he's He's put up some monster numbers, but Wake Forest football isn't exactly grabbing all the media headlines and all the attention. Has been a bit overshadowed playing there the past few years. Now steps into the limelight, though, playing with that gold helmet in the Midwest part of the country at Notre Dame. I feel like last year Notre Dame was a quarterback away from taking off at times under Marcus Freeman. Now this year, I think they have that guy in Sam Hartman who could potentially push them into playoff contention. Down at Wake Forest, as I said earlier, they threw the ball a shit ton. They're playing like an air raid style attack. This is going to be more of a pro style system, a balanced offensive attack. So his numbers might not be as great, but he's still going to be able to produce a lot, I think. Coming from an ACC school in Wake Forest, played in the Power 5, he's shown the ability to step up and play really well against some high-level competition. So I think he's a guy that can really open up this Notre Dame offense, and I'm buying a lot of stock in him this year. Another guy that's plus 1,600 on the Heisman odds boards. Number 3 overall player, the guy that I'm driving his fan bus this year, and that's Jordan Travis from Florida State. In 2022, he had 13 games, 3,214 passing yards. 64% of his passes were completed for 24 passing touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, 417 rushing yards, and 7 rushing touchdowns. And this is a guy, I think, ready to help Florida State explode onto the scene. Florida State last year had their first 10-plus win season since 2016. So he's really been the engine that's really been leading this resurgence for Florida State football. Coming into the year, they're probably, I think, going to be the 6th-ranked team in the country. I think Week 1, we're going to see number 5 LSU versus number 6 Florida State. And it should be one of the better games of the season, and I'm really glad we're getting it Week 1. That's kind of the prime time, the state dinner type game on the Week 1 schedule, and it's going to be Jordan Travis, who is my number 3 quarterback versus my number 10 quarterback, and Jayden Daniels dueling it out. Jordan Travis can beat you with his legs. He can beat you with his arm, and I think the best thing we've seen from him throughout his years in college, he's really grown his game each and every year. I think earlier in his career, he focused on his legs a little bit too much. Now he's using them out of necessity. I think he's a guy that's going to look to beat you with his arm, and I'm really high on this Florida State team. Have done a great job recruiting over the past few years, but even more importantly, if you're a great recruiter now, you have to be great at retention as well. And Florida State and Mike Norvell have really been able to do that, convincing guys to come back, not just go into the transfer portal, but not go into the draft and coming back for another year. And with the potential to make history, they could bring Florida State back to the forefront and put them back where they used to be with Bobby Bowden, or even when they had Jimbo Fisher and Jameis Winston. Jordan Travis could be that guy to bring Florida State back, and I'm really a big fan of him this year, and I'm going to drive that fan bus the entire season. Number 2 on our list, 1 and 2 are going to be the 2 household names going into this season and most likely next spring in the NFL draft. Which one do I value more? A bit of a toss-up, but I'm going to put in Drake Maye, the quarterback out of UNC, at number 2. In 2022, he had 14 games for 4,321 passing yards, able to sling it all around the field, 38 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, completed 66.2% of his passes, but he also ran for 698 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns, the ACC Player of the Year. Coming into this year, huge expectations. It's expected that him and Caleb Williams will be the top 2 players in college football in the country and the top 2 picks next year's draft. Last year, Drake Maye's first year as the full-time starter down there at UNC, I believe it was his redshirt freshman year, lit it up. ACC Player of the Year, ACC Offensive Player of the Year. Just a huge guy, just your prototypical NFL quarterback that you want. 6'5", about 225, 230 pounds, and a rocket arm. He's able to throw it all around the yard. Kind of reminds me of a Josh Allen, but keeps better care of the football, and he's also, as Josh Allen is, a really good asset in the run game. When you look at that, 698 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, he plays for a North Carolina team that under Mac Brown hasn't exactly been known for their defense. He's going to be putting up a lot of points, be in a lot of shootouts, and it's going to be a really exciting player to watch this year. So I'm excited to see him in a second full year as a starter, if he can take his game to another level, or if he kind of peaked in that freshman year, some guys figure him out and he comes back down to earth a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see what we get out of Drake Maye this year, but for the time being, he's my number 2 quarterback. In our number 1 overall quarterback in this year's college football class heading into 2023, the guy that has been, I think, talked about more as a quarterback prospect more than anyone since Trevor Lawrence came out a few years back, or since Trevor Lawrence really took over the helm at Clemson back when he became the starter as a freshman down there. And that's Caleb Williams out of USC, entering his junior year, coming off a Heisman last year, as I touched on in the beginning, plus 550 to win the Heisman. When you look at Drake Maye, he's plus 1,600. So out of all the guys on my list, you got Caleb Williams at plus 550. He's the lead dog right now. Then you got Quinn Ewers at plus 1,200. Jayden Daniels plus 1,200. Jordan Travis plus 1,400. Sam Hartman plus 1,600. Cade Klubnik is not on my list, but he's going to be the starting quarterback at Clemson this year. He comes at plus 1,400. But Penix Jr. at plus 1,600. Maye at 1,600. McCarthy at plus 1,800. And Bo Nix at plus 1,600. Another guy I'd say to keep an eye on is Kyle McCord at plus 2,200 for Ohio State. Keep that one in the back of your head. But last year in his Heisman campaign, Caleb Williams won 14 games, 4,537 passing yards, 42 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, completed 66.6% of his passes for a really good year through the air. But then he contributed on the ground as well with 328 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns, capping off his season with a Heisman. And unless you've been living under a rock, there's kind of a reason why everyone is declaring Caleb Williams the next Patrick Mahomes. It's because he plays just like him, being able to not only beat you from the pocket, but be really creative and be really mobile and make plays out of the pocket on the move. Caleb Williams can do it all. And just like Patrick Mahomes, he's got the mobility and the wheels to beat you with his legs, but he only does it out of necessity. Like if it's like a 3rd and 3 late in the game, nothing's open down the field, let me take off, use my legs, get out of bounds, and extend the drive. Caleb Williams, a very smart, very high IQ player. It's easy to see why he's kind of viewed as the consensus number 1 player in this year's upcoming NFL draft class. But buying stock on him at the Heisman at plus 550, I don't know if it's that worth it, because we see that nowadays, like the voter fatigue and guys just kind of after winning one year, we haven't seen it. We've only seen it once in history in 1974 and 75 with Archie Griffin. We've never seen a guy go back to back. And it seems like, Bryce was the heavy favorite entering last year to be the Heisman. Lamar, after he won, was the heavy favorite coming back. Johnny Manziel, the same thing. I think you're getting a lot better value taking a swing on another guy on my list, like a Quinn Ewers at plus 1,200. Double the value there. Michael Penix Jr. led the nation in passing last year, plus 1,600. Kyle McCord could be stepping into an Ohio State offense loaded with probably at least 2 first-round picks at receiver, maybe even 3. There's a few more guys on this list that I give you some more good value and some more swing for the fence type people, but Caleb Williams at plus 552 isn't bad. It's just you don't see the Heisman Trophy winner declared twice. So as great as a player as he is, I think everyone's going to be gearing to shut him down, not just his arm but his legs, and he's just going to be, as all quarterbacks are in most parts, but the center of attention on defense. Can he stay healthy as well the whole year? He had that hamstring injury in the Pac-12 title game. So I think you get some better value if you're listening to this looking at a potential Heisman guy. But Caleb Williams at plus 550, I'm not going to bash you for taking that one either. Definitely the best quarterback in the country entering the season, and I think we'll see him as the number 1 pick next year in the spring in the NFL draft. But that'll do it for this episode of Beef Up Front on the Pick Swap Media YouTube channel. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We are 38 days away from recording this from week 0 between Notre Dame and Navy kicking off. So we're getting closer and closer to college football season. Make sure to stay tuned all the way up to week 1, and then we'll be covering you each and every week throughout the season as well. So thank you everyone for listening, and we'll talk soon.